must have called 1,000 times to tell you I'm sorry for everything that I've done. But when I call you, never seem to be home.
Welcome back to my channel, guys. It's Diva the Divine Light. And I'm going to continue our book read of Jerhonda Pace's book, Coming Forward, The Abused. Last we left it off on chapter 5. We will be reading chapters 6 through 11 today. And please make sure on your way in, you guys, you hit that like button. You hit that subscribe button, that notification bell, so that whenever your girl is going to upload your videos, you'll know when she's coming on. Make sure you hit all. And here we go. Chapter 6. February of 2004. It was that time again. We had no stability. So we all saw this day coming. This time was different. We were moving out of Chicago to the suburbs. Streamwood, to be exact. I was angry about the move to Streamwood. I didn't know what to expect from the suburbs, and I was tired of not having stability. Every time I was comfortable in school and made friends, it was time to move. I was 10 years old. The school hadn't let out for the summer yet, which meant I had to start a new school a few months before school was out and made new friends. Plus, I was moving away from my grandma. Even though I had built up anger, I was looking forward to a fresh start. Chicago housed some horrible memories for me. In between moves, we ended up being homeless at one point and had to live in a shelter. That's where I got my very first relaxer. My mom was so happy about me no longer having nigger hair, as she would call it. I also witnessed a man get killed behind our house on the 120th Place and Prairie. I saw drug deals, drug usage. My mother always put her relationships first. At one point, my mother had put my older sister in a mental hospital called Hartgrove. I was mad about that, and I cried for my sister. The one person I did not like that my mom dated was Curtis. He was a sick man. His children accused him of incest and abuse. There were times where we'd be in the car with him. He'd flat out say to my mom, "I want some pussy." He always gave me weird vibes. He would walk around the house, putting fear in us with his loaded shotgun, making threats. He used to have his son Chanel in the basement. The stories about him had all of us thinking that he was a crazy man. I never went close to him. I avoided the basement at all costs. Years later, I found out that Chanel was a crazy man. He was mentally ill. The weirdest thing I remember about Curtis is his request for my younger sister, Star, to be in the room with him and my mom at night. I don't know if sexual abuse took place or not. I just thought it was strange how me, TT, Snoop, and Crystal, who is Curtis's daughter and younger than Star, would all sleep in one room. And my mom and Curtis would sleep in another room with Star. I don't see how my mother stayed in that relationship with Curtis, knowing what he was accused of by his kids, before her having children with him. I guess the relationship was too good to be I guess the relationship was too good to her, and it brought her 2 kids. I was ready to leave Chicago behind. My older sister was nearing 17. My older brother was almost 13, and I had 3 siblings under me, ages 6, 3, and 1. We were all tired of moving, but I was looking forward to the 1-hour ride, though. This was our first daylight move due to my mom's regular night move routine. Once we made it to the suburbs, I wasn't angry anymore. The neighborhood was beautiful. The grass was green. Not a patch of brown grass or dirt in sight. There was a real park to go to, one that had working swings. We moved to a townhouse around the corner from that park. My mom was pointing everything out in the neighborhood as we were riding. When we pulled up to the house, my brother and I raced inside to pick our rooms. We knew that my mom would get the most significant room. We thought we would argue over who gets what room, but it was the complete opposite. We didn't argue at all. My brother picked the room that was closest to my mom. I didn't want that room anyways. I wanted the room that was near the top of the stairs. My other siblings didn't care about picking rooms as long as they had somewhere to sleep. It was always my brother and me in competition over everything. That's how we bonded, though. Ultimately, my brother is the reason why I have tough skin. Looking out of our mom's room window and watching the movers unload the moving truck, I knew every single last one of us were happy to be in the suburbs. School for us started in the spring. I was nervous on my first day. I didn't know what to expect. My brother and I went to different schools. In Chicago, elementary schools were K through 12. Moving to the suburbs, we discovered middle school, which was 7th and 8th grade. My brother was off to Teft Middle School, while I went to Parkwood Elementary School with my younger sister, Star. I went to elementary school and he went to middle school. We had never heard of that kind of separation before. On my first day of school, it was different. There were only 5 black kids, myself included. In Chicago, we went to majority black schools, so this was something completely different than what we knew. My teacher was friendly, though, so it didn't take long for me to like my new school. Reality hit me when we talked about our families and our plans for the summer. That's when I knew something was different about me. All the kids in my class talked about how their parents were married, their siblings, and vacation. My parents weren't married. I had more siblings than everyone in the classroom. And my vacation was me at Grandma's house. When school was out, I wanted to rush home and question my mom. Instead, I listened to R. Kelly's music and did some writing. I had the average black kid in Chicago story. I was always able to relate to kids in Chicago. My dad wasn't involved in my life. He spent most of his days incarcerated. So my grandma and my aunt tried to make up for lost time with me on his behalf. My mother was always going through bad relationships. At the time, she was no longer with my younger brother and sister's dad. She was back with Star's 6-year-old sister's dad. I didn't understand why my mother didn't have a stable relationship or why my father couldn't stay out of prison. I blamed myself for my parents' failed relationship. I thought maybe if I hadn't come along, things would have been better between them. The fact that I didn't have my dad in my life, it made me envious of the kids who had their dads around. I remember that we had this big recital coming up. It was right before school let out for the summer. I was able to be a part of it, even though I started school late. My music teacher said I could join in. only if I learned the songs in time. I learned the songs and I was ready to sing. On the night of the recital, my classmates had their families show up to watch them perform, and they were excited. I looked around, and I had no one there to support me. It seemed as if everyone's family made time for their special day, but my family couldn't make it. Poor girl. Poor girl. She had no family, no support, nothing. Unstable. I'm so sorry, Jerhonda, you went through that, honey. I noticed there was another girl whose family didn't show up. We were standing next to one another on stage. When the show was over, we talked for a little bit. Then we walked home together. She lived a few minutes away from me on the other side of the park. We started hanging out more, sharing secrets and bonding. Over time, she became a sister to me. She was 1 year older than I was, and we had a lot in common. We were both from Chicago, raised in some of the toughest neighborhoods, and were abused. I made a few more friends before summer vacation, so I had people to hang out with until I went to my grandma's house. Chapter 7, Summer of 2005. I was 12 years old when I started to travel alone to Chicago via the Metro train. I had taken the train with my mother a few times going downtown or to my grandpa's house, and I familiarized myself with the way the train system worked. Every summer, I went to my grandma's house on my father's side. Some of my fondest memories were at her home. Year after year, I looked forward to going there. I was a grandma's girl for sure. My older sister and brother knew how much I adored my grandma, so whenever we had arguments, they'd say, "That's why your grandma a crackhead." That always got under my skin. I was so angry and ready to knock both of their heads off. I would yell out, "My grandma ain't no crackhead." Snoop was prepared to put it out there that she was, and would ask me, "Why do you think her and Mom was meeting up at the program?" "She a crackhead." I'd fire back. "That was the meeting place. Mom said it was halfway." TT was always by Snoop's side, reminding me that I fell out of the sky naked and that nobody loved me. That's so terrible. That's mean. Her brother and sister was mean. My sister used to do that to me when I was a kid. She used to say that my mom was not my mom because I was a nigger, because I was black and she was white, and so I didn't belong to the family, and I was adopted, and all this crazy shit. Yo, that broke my heart. It broke my heart. My sister used to really hurt my feelings when I was young. She really did. She broke my heart. Oh, boy. Kids will be kids, though. Continuing. Snoop's side reminded me that I fell out of the sky naked and that nobody loved me. I knew it wasn't true, but she had been telling me that I fell out of the sky naked since I was a toddler. I somewhat believed it. I questioned my mom often about my birth. It didn't help when she and my dad had two different memories of the hospital where I was born. My mom said I was born at Mount Sinai, while my dad argued that I was born at Rush Hospital. I sat back and questioned everything my siblings said to me. It did make sense. I remember being at my grandma's house. She and my uncle would be in the bathroom together. Whenever I went into the bathroom behind them, it had a robust, weird scent mixed with air freshener. I had never smelled that powerful odor before. My mom and grandma did swap me off at a clinic that they called the program. I learned later in life that it was a methadone clinic they had been meeting up at. Oh, wow. So her grandmother and her mom were dope fiends. Where they were meeting to swap me off. My mom had a heroin addiction, and she was prescribed methadone to keep her off of heroin. Her addiction is what led her sister Tina to take us away from her. I would say that Tina had our best interests at heart. But the truth is, she only wanted to get custody of us so that she could get a check from the state. Nothing that ever comes from her is genuine. I looked at her differently since I found out. Chapter 8, Grandma's House. When it was time to go to my grandma's house for the summer, I packed my backpack. Yes, I packed my entire summer in a single backpack. Nowadays, I can't pack a weekend in a bag. After I was packed, my mom gave me train fare and called a taxi cab for me. The train ride was an hour long. I got off at the Western Ave stop in Chicago and walked to my grandma's from there. Looking back on it, that was a long, dangerous walk down Western Avenue. My grandma lived near the Manning Branch Chicago Public Library. If you know Chicago, you know that that's a nice distance for anyone to walk. However, I loved walking. I enjoyed the long walk to her house. When I arrived, my grandma greeted me. I was happy to be back to the place I considered my real home. However, my home life was a secret. Growing up in a black household, you'd think that skin color would be the last thing that anyone would consider problematic. Not in my house. Skin color was talked about all so often that I hated my skin color. My mother had this fascination for white skin. Of all my siblings, I was the lightest one at the time. That automatically made me my mom's favorite, according to my siblings. I still remember my mom saying, "If it ain't white, it ain't right." She hated when us girls, my sister and I, had any black friends. She would always say things like, "Don't bring them black motherfuckers to my house," or she would refer to black girls as black bitches and bullshit. To her, all black girls were drama. She would say those things to an 11-year-old me. It was said often that it became routine. My sisters and I learned to ignore my mother's comments about blacks and whites, even though I would only be here for the summer. It was my escape. I was limited to what I was able to do. I couldn't go too far. I had to check in every hour or so. Therefore, I mainly spent my days at the library. Things were stricter thanks to my auntie, who was like a second mother to me. She showed me love that my mother had never introduced me to or showed me. I enjoyed being under her, my aunt. She treated me like her child, and her kids were my favorite cousins to be around. I often dreamed of being adopted by my aunt and becoming my cousin's little sister. Everything wasn't all good because I was called white girl and Oreo there as well. I was known as someone who talks white. It was said that I needed more black in me. I was from the projects. There's no way I should be that white. And my grandma always told me that an Arab man was my dad. I always laughed it off, but I cried about it at night. I felt like no matter where I went, I just wasn't accepted. Bendito. Poor Jerhonda. Oh, that's so sad, you know? I was from the projects. There's no way I should be that white. And my grandma always told me that an Arab man was my dad. I always laughed it off, but I cried about it at night. I felt like no matter where I went, I just wasn't accepted. Except when my family gathered around the living room. That's when I was the center of attention. Though I didn't like being showed off, it was embarrassing to have to sit there and speak Spanish on demand or dance while everyone watched and laughed. My grandma, aunt, and cousins thought it was funny. The truth is, I was their entertainment, and I hated every moment of it. Speaking Spanish was cool, but it's no fun when people are saying, Mama, count in Spanish, or Mama, say this in Spanish. That made me hate Spanish so much to this day. I refuse to go back to learning Spanish. My passion for dance was ruined at my grandma's house. I no longer cared to model or dance. I lost my love for those things early on. I don't understand why I was looked down upon for going to a better school or learning Spanish, but it happened. Chapter 9, Dad. When my dad wasn't in jail, he spent time with me at my grandma's house. I still remember seeing him beat his girlfriend up. He was very abusive towards her and every woman that he dated, even my mom. He was so abusive towards my mother that she stabbed him 3 inches from his heart in self-defense. He also stalked her and controlled her every move. Whenever she went to the bathroom, he'd stand outside of the bathroom door. One day, we were at his girlfriend's tea house when they got into a heated argument. She had a futon bed in a closet outside of her bedroom, which is where I was hanging out. As I sat on the futon and watched the movie with them through the opened bedroom door, my dad started yelling at her. I don't know why. She walked out of the room, past me, into the kitchen. Being in the hallway, I was able to see everything. My dad followed her as he yelled and called her a bitch. She said, "Stop yelling at me, Rome. I'm not your child. You can get the fuck out of my house." That set my dad off. He slapped her in the face. Then he proceeded to choke her. She stumbled a little bit, never fighting back, and he dragged her towards the room by her neck. As they passed me, he told me to go to your grandma's house, which was across the parking lot. T lived in the same complex as Grandma. I was so scared that I didn't move. T pushed my dad off her. He slammed her on the bed and began punching her in the face. I had a clear view of everything. Somehow, T got out the bed and tried to run, but my dad pulled her back into the room and closed the door. All I heard was her screaming. When my dad was satisfied, he came out and grabbed me by the arm and said, "Go to your grandma's house." He watched me walk across the parking lot from T's apartment. As a little girl, it didn't strike me that my dad was abusive. Everything he was doing was things that I'd seen all of my life. It was considered normal to me. I guess that has everything to do with my mother's relationship. Every single one of her relationships involved abuse. Rather, she was the victim or abuser. There were some bad memories at my grandma's house, but I liked this place more than home. Living in that environment caused me to hate my skin. I used to stay in the sun for long periods in hopes of becoming darker. I prayed for darker skin. I hated not being dark enough. I wore more colored clothes, picked darker shoes. I started to only listen to black artists. I tried so hard to be accepted. It didn't work. However, I remained the topic of discussion amongst my siblings, friends, and other family members. I don't know where the black and white thing came from with my mother, but I do know that for us, it started with her. She ruined our self-esteem and self-confidence early on. We all had to go through the mental shame of being a black girl. I was not proud to be black. I hated myself. When other people shamed me for having lighter skin, I expected my mother to speak words of encouragement into my heart. Instead, she was just like them. There was nothing she hates more than our black friends. I still remember having to sneak around to hang out with black girls. Whenever someone spent the night, my mom would speak loudly about her hate for blacks. It had gotten to the point where I stopped inviting people over. Thankfully, I am older, wiser, and better. I am a proud black woman. I love my skin. There is nothing that no one could ever say or do to make me think, feel, or believe otherwise. Please be mindful of the things that you speak into children. It all starts at home. This is true. She's right. She got a point. It all starts with home. So, whenever someone spent the night, my mom would speak loudly about her hate for blacks. It had gotten to the point where I stopped inviting people over. Thankfully, I am older, wiser, and better. I am proud, black woman. I love my skin. There is nothing that no one could ever say or do to make me think, feel, or believe otherwise. Please be mindful of the things that you speak into children. It all starts at home. That is so true, Jerhonda. Whatever you do at home, these kids see everything. They hear everything. It's hard to, speak things in privacy sometimes, It's hard. It's hard as a parent to separate yourself from the children at times because you have to be there. You have to be there. It's hard to be there 24/7, but you got to be there, man. You got to be there for your kids. You have to. And you have to show them good examples. Chapter 9, Finding Myself. 7th grade year, I knew I was different. I wasn't attracted to boys the way that my friends were. I found comfort in females. I enjoyed being around girls and talking to them. I was attracted to the same sex. I believe that had everything to do with my fear of guys at the time. After I suffered from sexual abuse that involved multiple guys, I looked at them differently. I felt small around them. It was uncomfortable, and things were awkward for me. Guys always seemed so powerful, and I was powerless. When my friends were talking about their boy crushes, I used to say a random guy was cute. Even though I didn't like the boy that I mentioned, it helped me fit in. I was hiding my sexuality until I knew what it was. I wasn't ready to tell the world that I liked girls. I knew that it wasn't right. According to my immediate family, I didn't know much about my extended family, so it was best that I kept things under wraps until further notice. One day, my friend BB got into a heated argument with the girl that I called myself dating. When this girlfriend of mine told my excuse me, I need to get some water, guys. Okay, so Jerhonda is saying that she wasn't into boys. She didn't really like boys, that she felt like she liked girls. She had a better interest in girls. So, when this girlfriend of mine told my friend that I was gay, I denied it right away. I couldn't believe that she said that. I was so embarrassed. I didn't talk to her for months. All I could think is, how dare you tell someone that I'm gay without consulting me? In my family, gay is like taboo. You are not allowed to be gay. It's unacceptable. No discussion. Period. The summer before 8th grade, I was a bit more comfortable with talking about my sexuality. I came out on MySpace by editing my profile and adding a rainbow. A few of my friends questioned me about it. My response was, I'm gay. That was the end of that. None of my friends treated me differently, but they didn't know how to include me in specific conversations about their boyfriends when I liked girls. That was hard for them at first, but things worked out. I was single, so it wasn't a hard adjustment. Besides, I was still advising them regarding their boyfriends. I came out to the world, but I hadn't faced my family. I went to my mother about my sexuality, and she shut me down. I couldn't even begin to explain myself to her. She did not care. She disowned me straight away. She said, 2 girls can make a baby. I'm not trying to hear that. That didn't work out well. I tried telling my brother about me liking girls. He was not having it. His words were, I don't want to hear about you liking females. That shit's nasty. Your ass confused right now. Get out of my face with that. I'm not about to entertain that. When my mother shot me down, I was hurt. But I expected that. When my brother did it, I was heartbroken. I cried. I couldn't understand how or why my brother would be so cold. My brother was my best friend. He was the only stable male figure that I had in my life. We talked about everything. We always looked out for one another. 2 peas in a pod. Just thinking about that day brings out a certain sadness in me. That was hard for me to accept. To know that the one guy that I trusted and looked up to had judged me so harshly. I honestly didn't know what to do. I was down for a few weeks. Our conversations weren't the same. We went from laughing, joking, and talking all the time to me feeling like a failure. It was even worse when my brother found my journal and read it out loud in front of my mother, my sister, and myself. I bawled my eyes out. I liked this girl named A.B. I wrote about her in my journal. I thought that one day we'd get married and start a life in another state, have 2 dogs, and adopt kids. Innocent stuff. After my secrets were exposed, I felt like there was no way for me to explain myself or be accepted for who I indeed was. Upon my older sister finding out about me liking girls, things changed for sure. I wasn't allowed to be alone with my younger sisters. I couldn't change my baby sister by myself. I had to have my room door open whenever I had company. My life was hell. I was treated like crap, literally, all because I liked girls. After a while, I got tired of that treatment, and I forced myself to like guys. Once I started talking about guys, my family treated me like I was a part of the family again. It was weird at first to talk about guys because I liked them, but I wasn't really into them. However, I got used to it. I just wanted to be in good standing with my family again, and it meant so much to me when we were all on the same page. Chapter 10. Someone Like Me. Summer of 2007, I met Dominique online via MySpace. We were both a part of an R. Kelly fan group on there. We started messaging each other back and forth, just talking about our lives. When fall came, we learned about the upcoming Double Up tour that was going to be later that year. We were waiting for the WGCI pre-sale to begin so that we could get the best seats, so we thought. We bought our tickets during the pre-sale event. My grandma, B, bought me a ticket as her way of saying thank you for me helping her find a new apartment. However, we didn't get the great seats that we were expecting, but they were the best from the pre-sale. I was in section 6, row 1, seat 6. Dominique was in section 8. They were floor seats, so we didn't complain about that until a few days later when the tickets went on sale to the general public. We found better seats than the ones we'd purchased from the pre-sale event. We were mad about that, but we got over it. I was a huge R. Kelly fan. That was no secret. The Double Up Tour concert was my first ever concert. Al, my stepdad, wanted to make sure that I had a grand time. I think he was more excited than I was. The event took place on December 22nd. Al ordered me an all-white limo to take me to the concert. The driver even rolled out the red carpet when he picked me up. It was such a refreshing experience. Al continuously said, "You're 14, don't talk to strangers, call when you make it to Chicago, and stay by your cousin." My older cousin also purchased a ticket to go to the concert. The limo took me to my grandma's house in Chicago to pick up my cousin. Of course, she was late. I ended up walking to the concert, which was held at the United Center, because I was trying to wait for my cousin to get there. It wasn't far, though. My grandma lived close to the United Center. Once upon a time, the projects that I grew up in was across the street from it. It was a lovely evening, not bad at all for Chicago. When I made it to the main floor, it was crowded as heck. So many people came out to have a good time and enjoy R. Kelly's music. As I was searching for my seat, I ran into Dominique. At the time, I knew her as Nika. I didn't know her real name. It wasn't on MySpace. We said hey to one another and continued our search to find our seats. By the time I made it to my seat, it was showtime. I didn't care for the opening acts. I don't think anyone cared. We were all there to see the king of R&B. Before he took the stage, we were told that we couldn't take photos or record. When he finally came out, he put a stop to that and told people to pull out their phones and record since we paid our money to be there. That's when the crowd went crazy with photos and videos, non-stop cameras flashing. People's arms were blocking other views. Overall, it was a great experience. The concert was fun. The music was good. The entrance was epic. R. Kelly performed his ass off. At that moment, I knew why he was labeled the king. I didn't see anyone sitting during his entire performance. All in all, the show was great. I ended up spending the night at my grandma's house. It was late when we made it back in, so I sent my Al a text message letting him know that I was safe. The next morning, we all gathered in the living room and talked about the concert. Sometime later, I logged into MySpace and chatted with Dominique. We didn't expect to see one another and decided to exchange phone numbers since we unintentionally met. That was the start of us being inseparable. We talked on the phone all the time. If we were not talking, we were texting. When school was back in session, our phone conversations would start when Dominique had to go pick up her younger brother from school and ended at 2 a.m. Sometimes we stayed on the phone until it was time for school. We talked about everything. We had become best friends. Over time, we realized just how much we were alike. While I was ashamed for liking girls, her mom, Michelle, was forcing her to be a girl. Dominique was very boyish when I met her. Slick back ponytail, played basketball, wearing basketball shorts with a wife beater or a t-shirt with jeans all the time. Nothing about her was girly. Michelle's biggest fears was having her only daughter be a butch, as she called it. Chip didn't make it any better. She hated how much we were involved with one another. She thought I was going to turn her gay. Dominique just wanted to be a free spirit. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to be who she truly was because it was unacceptable to her mother. Michelle started getting Dominique's hair, nails, and feet done every 2 weeks to keep her girly, of course. Dominique hated it and complained to me frequently. She didn't want to let her mother down, so she went along with it. Wow, so Dominique was really liking girls. That's how she was. That's who she was. And her mom was trying to change her thoughts to liking boys just like Jerhonda. So I guess that's why they had a lot in common. You know, they had a lot in common because they related to one another. In that sense of, trying to come out and be who they were. Also, as well as they both liked R. Kelly, as well as they both lived in the same neighborhoods, and they were both around the same age. So that's how they linked up. So they met on MySpace, started chatting, and then they met each other at a concert, but they didn't really, hang with each other too much until later on, And so that's interesting. That's interesting to know. So Jerhonda really liked girls. She never really liked boys, but then she was forced to kind of like boys. And I guess Dominique as well. Wow. Chapter 11. Bad memories. This is going to be the last chapter, y'all. I'm going to read this chapter and then I'll continue on to read another day. So chapter 11, bad memories. The next few years flew by with ease. I made more friends. I was doing good in school. I was on the right path, despite the trauma that I suffered years earlier. Although life seemed to be going in the right direction for me, there was a void that needed to be filled. I was still communicating with my dad via letters to prison. I needed my dad in my life, and he wasn't there for me. There were lots of broken promises and unanswered questions. I hated my dad for not being there, and I hated my mom for allowing him to be absent. But I loved my mom so much for making everything happen on her own. She was such a strong woman. She was raising 6 kids on her own. I admired her strength, but there were some things she just couldn't teach me. I needed a solid foundation. I never had that. Even though I had my dad's side of the family in my life, they couldn't replace him. Not only did I not have my dad in my life consistently while growing up, but I was also left with bitter memories of my dad. He was in and out of prison, never staying around long enough for us to bond. It seemed as if he only came around when he wanted to whoop me. That created problems for me, and I didn't bond with my dad the way that I should have. His actions hurt me, and I didn't understand his parenting. Perfect example. My dad was best friends with my Uncle B, my mother's brother. One day, when I was 4 years old, we were over my uncle's house on the south side of Chicago when my mother's cousin John came over, who just so happened to be the same man who had sexually abused me months earlier. My dad didn't know about what happened to me. So when he told me to come over to say hi to John's, I walked over to him and spit on him. I didn't want to be around my abuser. My dad grabbed me by the arm, took me upstairs to the bathroom, pulled my pants and my underwear down, took off his own brown leather belt, and whooped my butt. Literally, he was holding me by one arm. I was screaming to the top of my lungs, running in what I thought was circles. Though I was hopping from side to side, I was trying to dodge a belt that made my butt sting every time it met my skin. He whooped me from the waist down. I kept saying sorry, but that didn't work. He didn't stop until he felt like his point was made. As he was whooping me, he was yelling at me, "You don't do no shit like that. Don't you ever spit on anybody again." After a while, I stopped saying, "Okay, I'm sorry," and he stopped. His last words before walking out of the bathroom were, "Now shut up before I give you something to cry about." Isn't that the famous line of these parents? Always, always, always. I say that to my kids. Like, stop crying or I'm going to give you something to cry about. You know, I wouldn't whoop them first. Of course, that didn't happen. I would just threaten them and they would cry, you know, and then I would tell them to shut up and be like, "Listen, stop crying or I'm going to give you something to cry about." You know, like I wouldn't whoop them first and then say that. That makes no sense. Like, but this poor girl, Jerhonda. Bendito, you went through abuse. You were unstable in your home. You didn't have a father. You really didn't have your mother. She was there, but she wasn't there. The only one you really had in your life was your grandma, but you couldn't really open up to her as much either. So you really had no support system. And now I kind of get it why you kind of strayed and did what you did. And you were curious about the man, you know, R. Kelly. You knew he was famous. You knew he was a singer. You were attracted to him. You wanted to be with him. You went to him. You got with him. And things didn't end up too well for you. But it's not your fault because you weren't guided. You were misguided. You weren't guided at all. Nobody guided you. Nobody took you by the hand. Nobody said, "Mommy, look, this is what it is, bro." Everybody just stranded you and abused you and didn't even pay attention to you. And I'm sorry that you went through that, honey. I'm really sorry that you went through that, baby girl. It's sad and I'm sorry. Hope you enjoyed that, guys. We will be continuing the rest of the book in the next few days. And please make sure that you hit that like button, subscribe and share, as well as hit that notification bell. Hit all so you can see all my videos when they come out as they come out. Thank you, guys. Peace.
Hello from the other side. I must have called 1,000 times to tell you I'm sorry for everything that I've done. But when I call you, never seem to be home.